Welcome back. So Cabinet will be discussing Eskom again in its Cabinet meeting tomorrow. While the company says we'll be in stage 5 load shedding for the next little while. At the same time, there's so many questions about Eskom. Some analysts have suggested we're likely to see worse load shedding. There are other questions about the fact that there's a state-owned entity. Eskom is a state-owned entity, and the SOEs are simply not working. Dirk is a director at QED Solutions. Dirk, good afternoon to you. You have extensive experience in our power system. You've looked at Eskom. If you look at the very structure of a state-owned entity like Eskom, you and others have suggested it simply cannot work. Why is this model so difficult? What's gone wrong with it?
Well, I think in a sense, most of our SOEs, and certainly the big ones that we all know about, emerged from the apartheid economy. Essentially, Eskom was there to supply electricity for the mines. Transnet, for instance, was there to sort of ship whatever the mines had or rail whatever the mines had to the ports and export it and actually import very cheap labor from the homelands. So the basis of why they existed once have changed. And I think what we haven't done is to have a sharp look at saying, well, why do these things exist in this particular structure and are they appropriate anymore? So what happens, I think, is that it just continues to run in a sense as it once did, but without the sort of underlying assumptions that and really the structure of the economy that it was before. And so, yes, I think we haven't really asked the big questions about why these SOEs exist in the way that they do still, and whether that's appropriate for the current environment. More so now that they are in serious trouble, all of them.
I mean, is it possible to fix an Eskom or a Denel or a Transnet without fixing the actual model of the SOE? And in a way, it's a strange sort of hybrid, you know. This is a government-owned body that actually runs something that you pay for. So you don't get the service for free like you would, for example, other government services like healthcare, but you actually pay for it, and yet it's a sort of a company, and yet it's a sort of government thing. I mean, I understand the ultimate basis for it, but, I mean, can you really make an improvement without changing the model wholesale?
I don't think you can. And I think, you know, what we've been doing is trying to pretend that we can sort of move things around on the edges and improve things in that way. I might add that, you know, whether it's Eskom or Transnet and the others, that they operate in a monopolistic environment. So it doesn't really matter whether it's state-owned or not, but you don't have market signals and prices to say when you should invest, when you shouldn't, and those sorts of things. So there haven't been. I'll give you an example. One of the things that I looked at was PRASA. 2/3 of PRASA's revenue come in straight from the government. So whether they carry passengers or not is pretty indifferent to them as on a you know at the management level and even at the worker level. I mean, it's the incentives are all wrong, and they need to be looked at.
There are other issues that come out as a result of this. I mean, if you look, for example, at how Eskom was supposed to be split into 3 parts, and that doesn't seem to have happened. I mean, I haven't seen, I think Carol Payton pointed this out, I haven't seen directors being appointed to these companies. It seems like that process has just stopped somehow.
Yes, I think there's a whole lot of, let's call it institutional inertia, which makes this kind of difficult. I mean, you know, one of the things that I've noticed of late is that people are saying, well, Andre de Ruyter is probably not as good as he needs to be for the job, and so on. But I mean, we don't even have the basis to sort of make that decision, whether he's the right person for the job or not. Because what we should be understanding now is who is the owner, or let's say, who's the manager of a particular power station, and how's that power station doing compared to what it set out to do. Instead, we just sort of look at the top, and there's a whole lot of stuff at the bottom that we just have no idea about. And therefore, it's very hard for anybody, and I include the politicians that are responsible for this, to make any kind of proper informed decision about what's going on. It's a black box. We don't know how these things operate and how cross subsidies work, and I think that makes it very difficult, and it actually reduces what we seek, which is accountability. So it's not even a question of performance. It's about really understanding what's going on behind all of this. And to get to a proper understanding seems really, really difficult, not just for the public, but for those that are politically responsible.
I mean, that's possibly why people get surprised all the time.
Exactly.
Eskom top management as well. No one actually knows what's going on.
And I think that's where the real problem with these, the way that they're structured are, is that they're far too big. They're far too diverse. They operate without any kind of constraints or market constraints. Now they are. I mean, because now we've got, now they have to raise debt, and that's become more difficult. But I mean, Eskom raised too much debt. There was no question saying, well, can you afford this debt? Is it an appropriate level of debt for a company with these revenues to have? And it sort of just went on until it stopped. And then we are in a really tricky position on making decisions under pressure. And my concern is because we don't have an overall view about what is important to maintain. We just go from one crisis to the other. And it's, I think somebody talked about, one damn day after another, or one damn thing after the other. So you're not really thinking about, what do we want? How do we want these things to work? What is the way into the future? What is important to own as public ownership, and why? None of that kind of debate is properly happening, in my view.
Governance and managing electricity is actually quite difficult. There's a reason why countries like Australia, places like California have had problems with their electricity market. They haven't been able to run them 100% properly, 100% of the time. I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just making the point that managing electricity can be quite difficult. What would a proper functioning market look like for South Africa? And I say that because it's obvious we need to make some sort of change. We have huge inequality, lots of people who can't pay for electricity, who need electricity if just to survive. Otherwise, I mean, we literally are back in the sort of 18th century. Is there a sort of model that maybe could work? And that model would probably have to include a national network just to find a way to make sure that the rich are helping to subsidize the poor. Because if we don't have that, then the poor aren't going to have power.
Sure. I mean, and it's an interesting question about what you do to cross-subsidize the poor. So there's two ways of doing it. One is to charge the rich who are using the same, let's say, the same services or in this case, electricity, to subsidize poorer households, but within the electricity system itself, so that the electricity system does it internally. The other way, of course, is to say, look, it's important that the price of electricity sends market signals to everybody, including the poor. And then you subsidize the poor directly from the central government to do that in a sense like a income grant. Now, I think those are important discussions because if anything that is subsidized is used more than potentially it should be, and if you're working in a constrained environment, maybe that's not a good idea. For instance, what would happen if we had better pricing, time of use pricing, so that you could say there were periods in the day when we don't have such huge constraints. I mean, now is not a good example, where the poor could access electricity for almost zero cost. But all of those things need to kind of happen, and we need to talk about what we want to achieve with pricing and where the subsidies, in fact, should occur. And I think what happens is that nobody knows enough about what is the best way of doing it. So you sort of simply impose some mandate and you sort of say, well, this is going to be free electricity, but then the cost of it emerges, and it doesn't emerge immediately, but it emerges 10 years later when you find that your SOE is on the ropes. And I think that that's a big mistake. And a big part of that is because these are big monsters working in a monopolistic, vertically integrated monopolies, that aren't getting price signals and aren't operating according to market. Now, I don't want to say the market is the way that you allocate resources only, but it does give an idea about where you should invest, what the pricing should be, and to the extent that you depart from that with subsidies, then make that explicit, and it becomes a whole lot easier to manage, from the politician side. And I'm sure, when you have, say, the president or the others saying, we're going to fix this, I have no doubt that that's what they would like to do. I don't think they're in a position to figure out what the best steps are, and that is a real problem.
Dirk, Director at QED Solutions, really appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed. Thoughtful.